Hey guys, this is Julian of Julian Gray Media. Sorry for the weird camera angle and stuff. I had to do this really sophisticated setup so that we can capture multiple things at once for the sake of this video. You'll see it in a minute. Bear with me for a second as we get started here. If you enjoy this video, consider supporting me on Patreon for exclusive perks including project file downloads, tools for your creative process, early access to videos, and more. Click on the card in the upper right-hand corner for more information. So this video is a follow-up to a video I did a few years ago on this product called DMXIS. Now this is the original DMXIS by this company called Enttec. The device allowed you to control DMX lights, which is essentially production lights, stage lights, performance lights, with a VST plugin, which was incredibly intriguing for me as somebody who doesn't have a huge background in stage lighting, but has a huge background in music and the software we use for that. So my previous video on this subject is essentially the definitive video about DMXIS and its hardware component. The problem is that the software is no longer officially supported. It's just kind of antiquated. I think the original software is probably about a decade old at this point. So it was due for an upgrade, compounded upon by the fact that there was a chip shortage and this unit is now discontinued. So a lot of people in that video, I see this comment on the screen constantly about, I can't acquire this, can you use some other device to control the lights? Can I do this with another unit or some sort of other software? And I'm pleased to say that there is a new software by Enttec, which is essentially DMXIS 2.0. It's called EMU. This little guy here, it's actually cheaper than the original DMXIS, is essentially the equivalent of the previous DMXIS, and you can pick it up in the link below. It's called the DMX USB Pro. So you can find the hardware and the software in the description of this video. So this video is essentially a part 2, as we've kind of established by this point, of my previous video on DMXIS. If you're interested in checking that out, make sure to click on the link in the upper right hand corner right now. I go a little bit more in depth on setting up the DMX chain, how DMX protocol works, how DMX channels work. We're going to cover a bit of that in this video, but if you want a more in-depth look, I encourage you to check that video out first. I think it would be very helpful to getting you acquainted with how DMX works and all of the features of the protocol. So before we get into the software, I'm just going to give you a quick look at the hardware. It's very self-explanatory. You have a USB 2.0 Type B port on the front, DMX in and DMX out. They're both a 5-pin DIN connector. You will have to adapt it down to an XLR connector if you're using traditional DMX standardized stuff. You can pick up a converter like that for a few bucks on Amazon. That's the basis of this box. Very, very simple little unit here. You just basically run DMX out of here, and then you run it as a daisy chain through all of the lights in the chain. Take this 5-pin, you either run it as a 5-pin or convert it into a 3-pin XLR connector. As I described in my previous video, you just basically daisy chain. You go out of this into the input of your first light, out of the first light into the input of the next light, etc. until you reach the end of the chain. You can use a DMX terminator at the very end on the last light on its output, and then you have the hardware setup. One thing to mention, DMX uses a different impedance than, like, say, a traditional microphone XLR cable. So if you want the best results and the best stability, especially over distance, you're going to want to use designated DMX cable. However, I've been on sets where I'm shooting a music video or a short film or something like that, and I need length, and I go for a microphone cable in a pinch. I encourage you, if you are looking to buy new cables for this, to pick up DMX specific cables. All right, so now that we have the hardware set up, the next thing you're going to want to do is assign the channels of your lights. Just as a basic rundown, every DMX fixture in the world, whether it be a fog machine, a moving head, a parcan, or what have you, they all have a DMX address, and there's 512 DMX addresses within a DMX universe. You're going to want to figure out how many channels your light uses. So if you reference the manual of your light, or if you go online and look up the channel breakdown of your light before you buy it, you can figure out very easily how many channels it uses. Some lights actually have multiple channel modes. So like if you want to have a really elaborate setup with more control, you can go for like a 15 channel control. And then there's a mode where maybe it's 4 channels if you want to go really small or really simplistic. A lot of lights have this. You just want to make sure that you know exactly how many channels you're dealing with. So then you're going to want to assign the DMX addresses. Now for your first light, you're going to want to use DMX channel 1 to whatever number the amount of channels is that the light uses. If you have a 9-channel light, you're going to be taking up channels 1 through 9. Then the next fixture will want to start on channel 10. So then your next light will be channel 10 to whatever amount of channels it uses is. Again, I go into a deeper dive on my previous video. If you want to check that out, watch the first few minutes and you'll figure out how DMX routing works and how to assign addresses. All right, so now that you have an idea of the hardware setup and the DMX address setup, we can hop into EMU and get started and take a look at the actual software setup, which is the most involved part of this process. Let's go ahead and hop into EMU and I'll show you how to get things started from a technical front. All right, so this is EMU, the new version of DMXIS. As you can see, it looks nothing like the original. You come to find that all of the features you're familiar with are still here and just as functional, if not more functional. All right, so when you open up EMU for the first time, you're gonna have to activate it. There's information on the website on how to do that. Once you do, you'll get to this page here. On this page, there is a list of all of the DMX devices on the network. What you're going to want to do is just plug in your DMX USB Pro. When you do that and you press rescan, as you can see, it comes up as DMX USB Pro down here. A really cool thing to note, if you use DMXIS in the past, DMXIS actually works with this software. So you can actually just buy the software or license the software or what have you and use your old DMXIS hardware for this program if you already have it and you just want to get a software upgrade. What we're going to do is check this on to enabled. We are just enabling the device we just plugged in. You're going to want to make sure you do that beforehand. So once you press OK, you get into this main window here. It looks very empty, and that's because it is. We haven't assigned a patch yet. So what I'm going to show you how to do is map your lights in the same way you would in DMXIS, give you a rundown on how it works. I'm going to go ahead and take my DMX cable and get this plugged in. As well, as you can see, we have a clear line of DMX now to the lights. You will know that this works if you see the lights blinking a red dot. Not sure that you can see that, but the bottom corner of these lights is blinking red. I have these lights mapped to DMX channel 1 for the left light and DMX channel 10 on the right light. That's because each of these lights is set to a 9-channel DMX control mode. There's also a 14-channel mode like I mentioned in the beginning of this video, but I'm using the simplistic 9-channel mode just to keep this video simple. So now that we know that the left light is mapped to DMX address 1 and the right one is mapped to DMX address 10, we can actually go back into the patch mode here, and we can actually patch the lights in the same way that we have them on the floor here. So what we can do, it's really cool now that you can search by manufacturer. I know this is a Lixida manufactured light. If we click on the manufacturer, we can have all of the list of the fixtures that are within the repository of lights. This one is the LED mini moving head, and I'm using it in 9-channel modes. From the list here, we can actually drag them on. And like I said before, we know that this is mapped 1 to 9. We know the second light is mapped at 10. So we can just drag it onto 10. And I like this new way of doing this because you never actually have overlap, because you physically can't overlap the lights here. So you can always double check. You know, if you see that, let's say your second light was mapped to 9, there's going to be an overlap on the hardware. And in the software, it allows you to see visually, you know, we can't actually map the second light to 9, otherwise we're going to have some overlap and that's going to cause issues. One thing to mention here, and it's something I've brought up to the Enttec team when they're working on, is there's no actual way to add a local fixture. So let's say that your fixture wasn't listed within here. Let's say you got a cheaper fixture or you got a fixture that was, you know, not very common. You can actually reach out to the team at Enttec. They add lights that are submitted by the community. I don't know how scalable that is, but for the time being, they have this policy where if you submit a light, it will be submitted and processed through and added to the repository by the next week. You can find more information on that in the description below. But if you do have a really abstract light, it isn't listed within the fixture library, make sure that you're setting up beforehand and you don't wait until the day of to set up, because there's actually no way you can add lights that aren't within the library. You actually have to reach out to them and have them add your light to the library. There's actually some really good advantages to this, which kind of make up for it. If you have a bunch of channels that are notated red, there's some sort of metadata that you can actually select all of the red channels in the entire array at once. You can select all of the pans, you can select all of the tilts, you can select all of the white control. That's really useful, and I think it's something that really makes up for the fact that they don't have a designated fixture editor. A little bit of a silver lining there. I still find it annoying that you can't add your own fixtures just because I like to do that sort of thing. But I know for an average user, it would be easier just to submit the manual of your light to their fixture library and have it updated here. So as you can see, we've dragged in the 2 lights featured here below. We have the left one at channel 1 and we have the right one at channel 10. I should say address 1 and 10. That's all you have to do actually for the DMX setup. So if we close out the patch window, you can actually see the parameters of each of these lights. We have, like the pan, which is like the rotate of the light. You can kind of see that. If I actually illuminate it, like we put the dimmer up to on and we set it to like red, you can see that the pan works here for the right light. We can also do a tilt. And that's your baseline lighting control, same as DMXIS and any other light design program. So within EMU and its predecessor, DMXIS, you have a variety of ways to modulate these parameters, and this is where it gets interesting. So, in theory, you could map all of these to a MIDI controller, and you can perform your lights, like old school, like slide the red channel up on the beat. There's better ways to do this. You can actually control these parameters with a variety of really cool features. All of the modulation features can be found here on the right-hand side. And I actually really like the way they've sorted this now. You'll come to find it's a lot more intuitive than DMXIS. If we drag a fader up, let's say we go for this red fader, and then we click on oscillator, it allows us to apply a pattern to that fader. So let's say we wanted to go at a sine wave, which is like a gradual curve and gradual fall. You can see it applies it to that fader. We can adjust the speed. We can make this longer by increasing the length, like a 4 bar instead of a 1 bar, or we can make it even shorter if we wanted to, make it flash faster. But I quite like this. It's actually the same as DMXIS in a more efficient and optimized way. You can adjust the shape in the same way you could before in DMXIS. The amount obviously is how much it's moving that fader. Yeah, so that's the oscillator. And what I like about this is actually if we go to another parameter and we start modulating it, like let's say we apply a sine wave to the white channel as well, like that. As you can see, it actually keeps tabs of which channels are doing what. We have a modulation on the red channel, we have a modulation on the white channel, we can actually go in and adjust them. You actually couldn't do that on DMXIS. Some other cool stuff here too, we have a sound tracker. I don't have my sound in DMXIS set up, but if you wanted to, you can go in here and set an audio input device, make the faders automatically react to sound. I would imagine if you're doing light design and you're doing something, more advanced like this, you're not going to be using this all that much, but I can see a few applications for it if you're just trying to set and forget something. And there's a really cool XY plot which controls the pan and tilt of your light. So if we set the red on, this is a really cool feature. We can pan and tilt with this plot. So that's the basics of some of the modulation features in EMU, but there's one more really awesome modulation tool, and that's VST control. So we can actually control all of these parameters as automation lanes within our DAW. And we're going to dive into that in a minute. I just want to show you really quickly some of the other features as well. So something I didn't get into very deeply in my last video was the program and banks feature, and we're actually going to use that a lot more here in EMU. I find it's a little bit more functional. It allows me to do things that were a little bit more difficult before or more manual in the old method that I had. If we go up to here to programs, you can see that there's 2 tabs here. There's banks and then there's programs. Now banks are overarching banks of programs. Programs are the subsidiary of the banks. So if we add a bunch of programs, they're all contained within the default bank. If we have another bank, as you can see when we switch off of it, it's like a folder hierarchy. Let's say you have a song that you have a bunch of programs that you want to run for that song. You can apply it to, bank. And then you have all of these different programs that you can call within that bank. For the sake of this video, we're only going to use one bank, but I'm going to show you how the program feature works here. So what we're going to do is select one of these programs. I'm actually going to name this, let's call it red. So the idea of programs are essentially they are what is a preset for lights, and whatever you assign in this program within the main window will be tied to this program. And if you call upon the red program, it's going to bring up any programming you've done for this red program. You can also call upon new program too. So if you click out of programs, let's go ahead and for the red program, as you can see it says it right here at the top middle, we're just going to set the lights to red. I'm just going to open up the red channel on here and then open up the dimmer, and as you can see we now have 2 red lights. This is a basic program. We've made a program that when we change to it, it will make the lights red. Let's go ahead and make one for something else as well. Maybe program 2 can be blue. So if we go into blue now, and we set the lights to blue, as you can see, very true blue. We go back to programs, we select red, it's red. We go to blue, it's blue. And all of the parameters within these programs actually translate as well. So if we go to red again and we said we want to make the red pan at a certain speed, so let's set like a sine wave pan for this. Set the height of it maybe to the top, and then we're going to set the sine wave. Now when I select the blue light, it's going to reset, and it's just going to be stationary. The red program contains that pan. Let me just apply another oscillator maybe to this other red light. So now we have those 2 moving in conjunction with one another. And when I select the blue, it is now stationary. Once it catches up, stationary and blue. So I'm sure you can see the potential of this. You can set whatever parameters you want to, these programs, and then when you recall the program, it does the thing that you want it to do. I think this is most useful for things like panning, tilting, color control. Like if you want all of your lights to be red, or you want like a large amount of your lights to be red, you can do that with a program. And it's really cool because then you can recall them quickly through your set. It just makes it really easy to change all of your lights at once. Let's say that you wanted another program where half lights to blue and half red. Set this one to red and then this one to blue. This scales as well. So if you had like, let's say, 100 lights, you can set the individual color parameters for each light in the program, and then whenever you recall this program, it'll be that color system. I think that this new system will make it a lot easier to get a lot of programming done quickly. There's a few things that you can't do with this. Like let's say you wanted to make the right one flash and the left one flash to a very specific beat of the song. And we're going to get into how to do that when we hop into the actual VST plugin. But for basic generalized automation and programs, like for the majority of your song, this is probably going to do you just fine. Just wanted to show you quickly, you can actually adjust the programs and the banks from below down here as well if you wanted to quickly cycle through them. I don't know why you would want to do this rather than just selecting them manually. Maybe if you had a chronological order of the banks that you just wanted it to cycle through over the course of an hour or something, you can actually do that with a fade and an auto change. You can set that up here. Okay, so for the next part of this video, I'm going to show you how to integrate EMU into Ableton Live. Now, there's a variety of ways to do this. You can actually, if you felt inclined, control every single individual parameter as a different automation lane in Ableton. I just find that to be a lot, and it's very cumbersome to automate every single tiny thing. Like, you don't have to manually draw the pan every single time. You generally don't need to get that much control. So the solution that I found works really well, referencing the programs again, is to basically make program chunks of your song. So like your drop will be this red pattern that we just created. And then like, let's say the verse will be this blue pattern. And then the chorus will be this pattern. Basically recall these whenever you need to, essentially. So I'm going to set this to, the static one. There's one thing you have to set up on your computer before we get started, and that's internal MIDI routing. I'm not sure how it works on Windows. I'm sure you can find a MIDI routing driver. The intention basically is to run MIDI data out of Ableton into EMU as an external device. And you can do that very easily on Mac by going to Audio MIDI Setup. You're going to go to the Show MIDI Studio, and then you're going to double click on IAC, and check device is online. And IAC is an internal MIDI routing tool within Mac OS. It's really, really convenient, actually. If you're a musician, you probably already have it on. So once that's enabled, you're going to want to go to Ableton Live, Preferences, and within the Link Tempo MIDI tab, you're just going to want to make sure that IAC driver is checked on both track and remote. And then within the EMU program, you're going to go to the settings again. You're going to go to MIDI, and you're going to want to make sure you have IAC driver bus 1 selected. If you're on Windows, this is whatever aggregate MIDI audio routing driver you're using. So let me give you a rundown of how this works. There's all of these MIDI features within EMU here. We can actually sync MIDI clock. We can MIDI tap tempo. But the one that I think is really valuable to us is MIDI note changes banks on channel, and then MIDI notes change programs on channel. So basically, what this is saying is whenever we play a MIDI note, it's going to change a bank on the channel that we select here. And as you know, if you're a musician or if you're familiar with MIDI at all, which I'm sure you are, is there's a ton of MIDI channels. If we actually go in here and we select IAC driver as our output, which is what we have to do, create a new MIDI channel, go IAC driver, there is 16 and an MPE channel for the MIDI device, virtual MIDI device in this case. What we're going to want to do is select channel 1, which we can mirror here. So if we want to change our banks, we can do channel 1. And then let's say we create another MIDI channel. We can do channel 2. And we can assign this to channel 2. So now, logically, whatever MIDI note we play on channel 1 will control our banks. Whatever MIDI note we play on this channel 2 will control our program. I'm actually not going to use the banks feature just because we're not utilizing it in this video. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. It's just a upper hierarchy of a folder that you can, sort different songs, programs in. For the time being, I think I'm just going to erase banks, and we'll just do programs. I'm sure you understand how it works, though. One thing before we get started, you're going to want to make sure to turn off inputs so that the IAC driver is not looping back into itself. It'll just cause problems. So now, as you can see, we have a program's MIDI channel that's routed to channel 2. Channel 2 is being accepted in EMU. As you can see, if we actually play a note, go ahead and draw in a note really fast. The blank MIDI clip. Let's go all the way to the bottom and just turn on listen. You can see it's sending MIDI value 1. It's because we're playing the bottom note. This is the first note of all of the musical notes in this MIDI channel. Send channel 2. As you can see, it grabs channel 2. And behind me, you can see the lights are now selected program 2. It's very self-explanatory from here. If we do 3, it'll grab the third program. This could be used to create whatever show that you want at a simple level. Like if you had a song in here and you had like a drop for this section, and you had a chorus for this section, and you had a verse for this section, you could, in theory, draw the notes corresponding to the program for each section. So like if you've gone, like we did earlier, and you've created some pan and tilt controls with an oscillator, let's say you did this, basically you have a program for the drop. You could actually, make this red, and we can say that's channel 2, so we want to draw in MIDI note 2 to select channel 2. As you can see, when we play this note, it's grabbing the red program. If we make another note that's like 3, third note in the row, this will be the blue program. And you can see behind me, it's blue. Maybe we can set it to blue so it's more obvious here. Let's just make these blue. Yeah, there you go. So on and so forth. Half blue, half red. That could be the channel 4. Maybe we'll make this one like nice, like dark blue, so we know that it's something separate. And yeah, so at a very baseline level, if we played this now, you can see, based on the timeline of the song, it's playing a program of lights. And that's a really simple way of using EMU. You can also consolidate all of these into one big clip if you wanted to play this alongside your set like this. Whatever MIDI notes is the correspondent program that's being played. So that's the baseline setup for programs and banks. I think that's enough for most people. But those overachievers of you like me who want to do something a little bit more extravagant can use the VST feature and get a little bit more control out of their lights rather than using the rudimentary programming modulation within EMU. If you want to do more advanced programming, add in a MIDI track and make sure that when you installed EMU, you installed the VST plugin as well. It's called EMU as well. It's a VST3 plugin. Load that up, and as you can see, there's actually no visual to this plugin. It's entirely functional, and it references this program as its UI. So we've gone over the basic modulation methods of each individual parameter, but there's a way we can actually do it manually, and that's here. So if we click on a channel and we right-click on it, actually, before we do that, we're going to want to enable configure within the VST. Click on a channel and then right-click it. We can select VST Mapping. Now what this lets us do is set a parameter for the VST map. I think this goes up to 512. 512 individual parameters you can automate within your DAW this way. If you just press map, as you can see, fader 1 is now dimmer. We uncheck configure. When I move this, we now have control of the dimness for moving head 1 on fader 1. And you can actually also do this as well with fader 2. So if we wanted to have uniform control of both of these, we can map both of these to fader 1. As you can see, fader 1 now controls the dimness of both of these lights. I think this gets really useful if you're actually doing individual controls for each of them. So let's say that you had an array of lights, like 4 lights in a row, and you wanted to go bump, 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 to like a beat, like da 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 da, instead of something like an oscillator. The best way to do that is to grab something like a dimmer and to VST map each individual light. So if you did VST mapping and you set this one to 2, I have to press configure first. As you can see now, fader 1 is for dimness of light 1, fader 2 is for dimness of light 2. You can use your program to select the light color, maybe, like let's grab red. And then you can use the fader to assign the dimness. So that's our dimness. That's our other dimness. Unfortunately, you can't actually map more than one modulation method to any given fader. I think that's a feature they should add in the future, like an overtake manual feature where the VST plugin can default back into a modulation. But for the time being, you can only use one at a time. So, I wouldn't map manual control to, like, let's say green, red, blue, white, or your pan and tilt, just because it would be a monumental amount of work to do programs for every song that way. What I would do is use the programs to select the color. So like you want to grab like the red color, and with this certain tilt motion or pan motion with that program, and then you use the dimmer to do the more elaborate animation controls. Like if you wanted to have like the left side go and then the right side go over time, you can do it like that. So if you actually go into automation here and you automate them, fader 2 corresponds to light 2 dim, fader 1 corresponds to light 1 dim. So you can actually do what I was saying. Maybe they go sequentially. Now, one thing to mention is that, DMX lights sometimes will have more than one feature attached to a dial. For example, this one has a strobe effect after maximum dimness. So you're going to want to find, the maximum height of that dimmer effect and then apply it to that. So like 135 or something. As you can see, sequentially goes across. You can do this for as many lights as you want, up to I think 512. And then, like I said, we can move this fader automation around. Let's attach it to a clip. Like let's create a clip. Command Shift M, by the way, and we can move this to the red program. So now when it's here, the MIDI clip recalls the red program, and then this recalls the light design itself. So it's like you can see they kind of flash in succession. Really quickly, before we wrap this up, I want to show you a feature that I used in the original video that we can use again here. It's limited by the number of macros that you have, but what we're going to do is apply a macro to these faders. So I just mentioned that, the dim dial has a strobe effect at a certain height. So if there's a way to make our fader, only reach this height, we can have, 100% fader where the top is the top dimness, the bottom is the bottom dimness. That would make it a little bit easier to understand rather than having these like half up faders. So what you can do is you can actually go into here and hit map. let's say we map fader 1 to like light 1 dim. I actually wouldn't call it light 1, I'd call it like region 1, because let's say that you had like 5 lights within like a line and you wanted to illuminate them all at once. I would map all of those lights dimness to the same dim. We go map, click this again, maximum value. So if we bring this up, you know, dial in where the maximum value is before it starts strobing. So 133 is our max value. When we collapse this again, as you can see, all the way up on the is bright, all the way down is off. Granted, now we can't use the strobe effect, but if that's something that you're trying to avoid, you're just trying to keep it simple, this might be better for you. All right, guys, I just put together a little demo for you for my latest single coming out on Monster Cat in a few weeks. This is with my good friend Bound to Divide and Avery Castle. It's called Losing My Mind. I used all the techniques in this video, including program selecting for color picking and for tilt and pan controls, and then using dimmer controls for more nuanced animation for sections that really require it. Let's go ahead and check this thing out. Alright, so as I was finishing the final edit of this video, a new EMU update just rolled out. This update introduces new ways to control multiple fixtures, and it kind of overhauls some of the way that it handles modulations. So I just wanted to show you the website quickly, the update website. I'll let you guys read the rest of it and check out the video on the website, but just as a quick rundown, as you can see, you can control multiple fixtures at once now. So if you actually grab, both of these, you can set the intensity of both of them individually by grabbing one of these nodes. So like I can grab only the right one or only the left one and adjust it individually, or I can set them together and actually move them simultaneously and set the midpoint, which you've never been able to do for the oscillator. So if you ever set an oscillator in DMXIS or in the earlier version of EMU, you know that you have to set the high value first and then you enable oscillation. This allows you to actually set the midpoint, which is a hugely needed feature. They also have a new way to control the X and Y of your tilt and pan. Very similarly, you can control the tilt, pan. You can also control them on the grid. And as you can see, we can grab both of these together. We can grab one at a time. And if we grab just the X, we can control both of the pans at once. You can control both of the tilts at once. I think this update just brought, more efficiency and optimization to things that we already have, with the exception of one thing, and that's this. It's the color picker, which is really cool. You can actually select a fixture or several fixtures, and you can assign a color based on a color wheel. So it automatically matches the RGB values. And obviously, if you're using cheaper lights or what have you, the color may not be completely true to this tint, but it'll be pretty close. So that's the update. Not too much more than that, but check it out for yourself on the website. Just wanted to mention it because it literally happened right as I was finishing this video. All right, so there is a demonstration of all of the techniques we learned today. If you found it helpful and you got something out of this video, make sure to give it a like. Make sure to subscribe for future videos, and make sure if you have any questions to let me know down in the comment section. I try to answer as many as I can. Go check out Enttec. They're amazing hardware and software that facilitates all of this. EMU and the DMX Pro or USB Pro, and go pick them up for yourself in the description of this video. And I hope you guys create some really cool stuff with the techniques that we learned in this video. I'll talk to you guys in the next video. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.